Sorry I'm late. How's everyone doing this evening? It is Monday. It's running around. Who wants to kick us off with what we covered last week? CRUD, lots of CRUD. Yes. What does CRUD stand for?
Create something, update and delete.
Read. Create, read, update, and delete. Read is the one that you always forget about because it's the one that makes the most sense of, oh, I've got to get that to show up on the screen. So read is normally the first one that you do. Sometimes you run into going, oh, well, I can't read if I don't have anything created. So sometimes you go create first and then read. But if you already have some data set up, you may read it first and then do create, update, delete. Order doesn't really matter, but those four operations, definitely good to keep in your mind. Yep, Dominique, we did nesting, we did arrays and objects. I think we are getting a good handle on when we use an array, when we use an object, how we access things inside of all of there. All of that was good. What else did we do last week? What did we do with our to-do app? What were some concepts that we learned from the to-do app? We did checklist, we did buttons, getting elements by ID. Yep, all part of accessing our HTML from our JavaScript. Again, some of that is going to change a little bit when we start working with React because the way our data links to our HTML through this magical thing called state. So when we update data in the React state, it automatically rebuilds our HTML for us. So that is really cool, but it's important to know kind of how JavaScript interacts with what we call the DOM, the document object model. And that the DOM is kind of the bridge between JavaScript and HTML. Whenever we access the DOM, that's when we're using that document dot. That's going in through there. So we were accessing elements, we're updating our HTML, all good things. Did anyone have questions either from the homework assignment or from anything we covered last week? Any code samples that you tried to run and you got errors on? Anything from last week that you would like to get covered this week? Anything like that? Okay. So this week we are going to split the week. The first 2 days are again going to be nothing new. We're going to do a messaging app, and hopefully you will see how repetitive the concepts that we've been covering from the past 3 weeks are. But I'm hoping that now that you have had a chance to do the homework and catch up, that we may be in type along mode instead of racing to catch up mode. So we are going to start with the user interface tonight and get a chat message bubble to show up. We are going to do something new, which is working with dates in JavaScript. You would think computers are very good at working with dates, and it turns out they actually are. But they're a little too good at working with them, and so they get very complicated. So what I mean by that is what happens if you're in a different time zone? What happens if your user's in the West Coast and you're in the East Coast? How do we get our date to show up? How do we, format it so it just shows the time as opposed to this really long string that may not be friendly to the end user? So we are going to play a little bit with that either tonight or tomorrow. My approach tonight, instead of layering Bootstrap back in, we are going to try doing that up front. So we're going to try building out our page, getting all the styling working, and then go in and wire up our JavaScript, which is probably closer to what a professional workflow will be. Companies are often split between front end and back end. And so it's common for a designer to design something in Figma or InDesign or InVision or Sketch or any of those programs, and then hand that off to a front-end developer. Front-end developer would take that code, build out all the HTML and CSS to go with it, and then they would pass it off to the back-end developer or the front-end implementation developer who would layer in the JavaScript and get all of that wired up. So this project is designed to kind of be an interesting three-part project. We are going to do this project without any React, any back-end code tonight. Obviously, it won't be super functional because we're not sending any messages out onto the internet, but we're going to play around with a set timeout tonight, which is how we can tell our code to run on a delay, and how we can get those messages to kind of show up. So we're going to do that. We are going to revisit this after the React module, and we will rebuild all of this in React. And then we will, in the backend module, layer in some API functionality so we can actually send and receive messages and see things show up in our app, which is pretty cool. But right now we are going to start with the front end interface. We are going to start from scratch, and we're going to focus in HTML and CSS to start. We will use Bootstrap tonight, but we won't be using a ton of Bootstrap components tonight. So I'm largely going to be using Bootstrap for the grid. And I think the grid is going to be the most helpful, at least for you guys in terms of your capstone and thinking about layout. We've gotten some feedback from the mentors of that layout is one of those interesting things that you're all wrestling with. So while I'm working in the grid, keep in mind your capstone in the back of your head, or keep in mind how you want to lay things out. And if you have any questions of like, hey, hypothetically, if you wanted to get this over here, how would you do that? And I'm happy to change a little of the code, get it to lay out that way, and then you can take a quick screenshot and go, oh, I'll come back to that and steal that for my capstone. So we will kick off the front end, but want to open it up to any questions again, in case anyone has questions about where we are headed. I did provide feedback to anyone who submitted their homework today. I also created an assignment for giving you guys all feedback, just in general, how you're doing over the course of the program. It is kind of subjective. It's just what I'm witnessing, either how you're interacting in class or the homework that you have turned in. I posted comments there thinking that those comments would not show up until the rubric showed up. Can you guys see access to the rubric or just the comments that I left? The rubric should have been a score like 1 out of, or it should be out of 3. And the rubric.
Is that in Google Classroom?
That is in Google Classroom.
Okay,
and it
I'll
should
check.
be under the module 4 week 3 assignment. I was kind of surprised when one of the students responded to my comments, and I was like, oh, I was surprised that you guys could even see that. So can you see the rubric? Most of you guys, I should have left a score, and it would have been either a 1, 2, or 3. If you are at a 3, you are exceeding expectations. There were only a couple of you guys that hit that, and that's the way it's designed to be. So if you are meeting expectations, you guys can consider yourself A students, that you guys are doing fine. We're not worried about you at all. If you see the, okay, so you see the rubric, but not the score. Okay. So I will be releasing that tonight. I wanted to give all the instructors a chance to review that, maybe until tomorrow. I will release that tomorrow night before class. And so you guys can kind of just see where you're at. those scores are all private, so other students can't see your score. If you are getting a 2, that means that you're fine and you have nothing to worry about. If you got a 3, that's kind of like a pat on the back, like good job, you're ahead of the pack. And then if you get a 1, we're just keeping an eye on you. Maybe you should check in with your mentor, or feel free to ping me for some more details. Dominique, if you go to Google Classroom, I'm afraid to share my screen because I do not want to reveal everyone's grade. So let me see if I can do that.
You don't have to show your screen for me.
If you are in the classwork tab all the way up at the top, and click on module 4 on the left, you guys don't have a classwork tab, do you? Oh, you do. Okay, so if you go to the classwork tab in module 4, there should be a module 4 week 3 individual feedback assignment. If you click into that, you do not have to turn anything in, but you should see your grade show up there. And I shouldn't even call it a grade. It's more of a metric, right? It's just a checkpoint to let you know how we think you're doing. I think half of you may get your grade or your metric and be surprised that you are in a particular group. And the flip also goes. You may be surprised of where you're at. So it's just an idea for me to be able to provide feedback to you guys. And if you have any questions about it, please ping me in Slack. So as you submitted your assignments, I tried to respond to comments and leave comments on the assignment. The problem is that I don't get a notification if you leave like a response to that. So if you are looking for a reply on anything, put it over in Slack. And I'm happy to answer any questions. It is a very subjective grade, so it's not like, you know, you took a test and this is why you got the grade and it is the way it is. And so nothing to be concerned about. We're not failing you out of the program. This is not panic material. This is just a checkpoint for you to go, okay, you know, I may be a little too in my head with how I think I'm doing. So this is where the instructor thinks I am at. So again, I will release those tomorrow. Yes, Rio, I'm just gonna release it now. Screw it. It's easier to do that. So if you refresh that page, you should be able to see kind of your score. And any comments that I left, which I think you've already been able to see. So I'm happy to stick around either at break or at the end of class, and we can go into a breakout room and I can chat with anyone who would like to discuss that. And you can also message me on Slack and we can chat over there. And for anyone who has not turned in their homework but is planning on turning it in, I will go back and upgrade your weekly score once I review your weekend homework. So this is not set in stone. This is just a quick touch base. Any questions that are fine for the class before we keep going? Anyone still having trouble seeing that rubric because Google Classroom is absolutely terrible? Don't worry, Google Classroom is at least as bad for the instructor, if not worse, than it is for you guys as students. We have already slotted in a better learning management system for Cohort 3. Okay. So with that said, I am going to dive into the chat app unless anyone has questions. Okay. Okay, so we are going to file open. And in order to keep my code organized, I am going to go to where I have my CIC folder, into my code folder, into module 4. And I'm going to create a new folder called chat. And I'm going to pop that open. Wherever you have been putting your code, that is fine. As long as it is not in the classroom folder, then you should be good to go. So I'm going to create a new file, and I am going to call it anyone, index.html. And while I'm at it, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it style.css. And finally, I am going to create my script.js. All right, out of all three of those, which file name matters the most? That's going to be my index.html, right? Because the index.html is telling the web browser, hey, if someone just goes to mydomain.com, index.html is the file that you want to load. So if you called that index1.html, the web browser would be like, I don't know what default page you want me to give to this when I request that domain. When we're running the code locally, not quite as important. But for script.js and style.css, we could really name them whatever we wanted, as long as we put the right name in our index.html to look at that spot. Okay, so I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to do my exclamation mark and tab. I'm going to get all of that goodness baked in. Hopefully, we are somewhat familiar with what each one of these lines are doing. If anyone has a question about any of these lines, feel free to throw it out. We're going to do a title of chat. We're going to put an H1 in here of test. And we are going to link our CSS. So what tag do we use for that? Link. And we are going to say the href is equal to style.css, and the rel is equal to style sheet. Why do I feel like that's wrong? No, it's right. It's weird that VS Code didn't help me out there with that. Okay, gonna save that.
Verse the rel and the href, and it looks more to me.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, that's why sometimes that's why I get confused.
And then we also need our what tag?
The script tag.
Script. And script is easy. We just do our source. We point it at our script.js. And then we oddly cannot make it a self-closing tag for the script tag because Internet Explorer sucks. Any other browser would recognize we just put a slash there, but there are some compatibility issues, which is why we need that closing tag to show up. Okay, how are we going to test all of this is working?
Open the index.html in the Finder and open it.
Yep. But when we do that, it will be kind of hard to tell if it is working or not because we just get the default test and we have nothing in our console. So what are we going to do?
Put some text in it.
Yep. We're going to go to our style sheet to start. And we'll say our H1 is now going to be blue. And in our script.js, we are going to console log test. And we're going to hop back over here, refresh. We get our blue H1, and we get our test in the console. So we confirmed all three of our pages are wired up. And Mel, we could have done an alert instead of a console log. Either one would have worked fine. How many of you guys are following along with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're following along.
I am.
Cool. Because we would like to do follow along tonight, please scream bloody murder if I'm going too fast, because we will pump the brakes and let everyone catch up. So last week was intentionally a little fast, so we could get through all the concepts. Tonight, I want to make sure you guys are following along, getting your files linked up, feeling comfortable with all the styling we're going through, all of that kind of stuff. So if you have any questions, definitely shout them out. Okay, I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com and I'm going to get started, and I'm going to grab our link and copy that and go back to my code, to my index, and I am going to put that above my style sheet so I can override things. Tonight will definitely be the first night that we are going to override Bootstrap more often than not. So we're going to save that. And we can tell that that is working by just refreshing, and we get a different font right off the bat. Again, we don't need our normalize or our reset here because Bootstrap has it kind of built in, right? So we're already up at that top and we're not fighting any margins. If you guys were to start a new project and we're not going to use Bootstrap, normalize is a perfectly good thing to use. Okay. So we would normally have hopefully a wireframe or more ideally a mock-up to go off of, right? But when we think about a chat app, we kind of think of it as maybe the name of the person up at the top, the messages kind of in the center, right? And the bar at the bottom where we can type a message and send it, right? So we're gonna recreate that, and we're not gonna get into multiple users yet. Maybe that's some functionality that we add in. But for right now, we want to kind of get to JavaScript as quickly as possible. But before we get to our JavaScript, we want to have something that looks kind of nice, because we are going to then take all of that HTML and just scoop it and drop it into our JavaScript to make it interactive and get all of that working. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my div container, because most things in our Bootstrap world will look better and work better if they are in a container. I'm going to put that up there. I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and I get my test moved over a little bit. Okay, I'm going to come in to my style. I'm going to delete out my H1 blue because we don't need that right now. And I am going to say message with mom in honor of Mother's Day yesterday. And while I'm in there, I am going to use a div class equals row. And rows are just going to make our content easier to work with, because rows automatically default to 100% of the width. So I come in here, I refresh, I get message with mom. Now I would probably like that centered. So we could just use text.center. But in our layout, we can always go to, do a search for text, and we get text alignment. And if we click on that, we can get reminders of text center, text end, all of that good stuff. And we can see it in use up here, right? So documentation is your friend. The grid is probably the only Bootstrap classes that I have memorized by heart. Everything else, I go to the documentation all the time. So I'm going to come over here. I am going to go to my row, and I am going to put a text dash center on that. And I'm going to refresh, and I get my text in the center. Okay, that's great, but it's kind of close to the top, and I want to differentiate that from the rest of the page. So I'm going to go back to my code. I am going to add something that I can target this with. So I will say header. And while header is great, it's not semantic. So we are going to make Dana happy. We are going to change the tag to header. So screen readers can understand where we're at. So Google can understand what content is in there. And then we'll target that header directly. So I'm going to remove my class from there. I'm going to go to my style sheet and I'm going to type in header. I'm going to throw a little margin top on the top of it. Let's start with 10px just to give it some breathing room from the top. And then let's do a border bottom. That is going to be 1px. It is going to be solid and it is going to be, let's just go for CCC and see what that looks like. So we get a little previewer there. If we want to make it darker or lighter, we can, but this is a hex code. So we want to make sure that we have our £sign there so that our CSS knows that it is gray, or it knows it's a hex code. Come over, refresh. We get our line. We get our message with mom. We got our margin on the top. We're good to go. So I'm going to come over here. I'm actually going to bump that up to 15, and I'm going to let you guys catch up.
So when I went to go add the color in my style CSS, I didn't get the block to pop up. Is there a way that I can manually do that?
You
'Cause
didn't
usually
get
it
like
does.
the color preview block, you mean?
Yeah, usually it just pops up on it by itself, but it didn't this time.
You have 1px solid and then £CCC.
Yeah, I typed it in manually since it didn't pop up, but so it looks exactly like your code, but it just didn't pop up.
When you go to the browser, does the line show?
No.
Okay, so there's probably something wrong with the CSS. Do you have semicolons at the end of both of your lines?
No, I'm missing the one under 10px. That's probably why.
Did we get our block?
No.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm going to split my screen here. Do you guys have a preference if we split left, right, or top, bottom, or keep it all in one?
For me, it's better visually with side by side.
Side by side. Okay. If anyone would like to vote in the chat if they prefer it a different way, let me know. But we're getting a lot of side by sides. Well, I guess side by side could be top and bottom too, but I'm assuming what you mean is left to right by side. So we will leave it that way. Lena, do we have spaces between the three properties? Do we have our colon and our dash in border bottom?
I got it figured out.
Perfect. Okay. Not seeing anyone completely lost yet. So we're going to keep going. Okay. So next thing is I want to get my messages to show up. And so we're going to start with dummy data. But what I think of when I see a chat app is I think of my messages over on the right, and they're kind of in green or blue. You know, you can make them however you want. And then I think of other people's messages over on the left, right? And when I think about them, I kind of think of the person's name maybe showing up above the bubble. Then we've got the bubble of their message content. And then maybe we have a timestamp down at the bottom. So we're going to play around with all of that. We're going to get that styling working. But when I think of the message bubbles don't normally go to the edge of the screen, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create inside my container, I am going to create another div. I'm going to call that messages because I just have the feeling that we're going to need to target that down the road, or at least style it, right? So in my messages, I am going to create another div, and that is going to have a class of row. And the way I'm going to make it so my message is not full width and it kind of looks like it's hanging over to the right a little bit is I am going to do a div class call2. And that is going to just have the word nothing in it. And then I'm going to do another div class, and that is going to have a call 10. And so when we're thinking about this, we want to think about it as out of 12, right? And so 2 is going to be 2/10 of the screen, and the 10 is going to be the other 8/10 of the screen, or 1/5 the screen, 4/5 the screen. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to jump back into my screen and I'm going to refresh. And it's like, well, that's doing what I want, but it's kind of hard to tell. So I'm going to come into my CSS and I am going to target my col2. And I have the dot in front of it because that's a class that we're targeting. And I'm going to make a background of green. And then I'm going to target my col10 and make that a background of blue. And so I refresh, and that gives me a better idea of, okay, this is 2/10 of the container, and this is the other, I'm sorry, this is 2/12 of the container, and this is 10/12 of the container. So we could adjust that down the road, but now we're getting an idea of where everything is showing up, right? Okay, so this is kind of hard to see. So I am going to take out my nothing because we actually want that to be a blank space. And then I am going to say, hi, mother, happy Mother's Day to you. I'm going to refresh. And all right, kind of hard to see. And we've got our green lingering. So I'm going to remove my green. And you know what? I'm actually going to keep this as blue because messages kind of look right in blue or green if you're an iPhone user. And I think even Facebook Messenger does green messages and blue messages. So we are going to target our color. Don't ask me why it's not text color, but it is just color. And we are going to make our text color white. We're going to pop in here and refresh. And perfect. That is exactly what we wanted. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and I am going to my row class, I am going to add another class that just says message. And we are going to come into our CSS and say our message should have a margin top of 10 px and a margin bottom of 10 px. So I come over here, I refresh. And it hates me because I didn't save my index.html. I refresh, we get some breathing room. Okay, I would like a date to show up kind of at the bottom, and that text kind of looks weird there. I kind of want that over to the right. So what I am going to do is I am going to, in my col10, I am going to do another div class called message text. And I am going to add text right to that. And I'm going to grab my hi, mother, happy Mother's Day to you and put that in there. And I'm going to refresh. And get a bad feeling that I didn't save again. Nope, I did. Refresh, and I get nothing. Maybe let's try our text right a little higher. Let's put it on our col10 and see if that works. Still nothing. So this is when we go back to our documentation and we see it isn't text right, it is text end. So come back in here. And I think it makes more sense there. So let's put that on a text end. Come over, we refresh. And we've got it over on the right. So we are going to go in here. And now I would like my timestamp to show up. So we are going to do it wrong the first way. We're going to add in a little line break. And we're going to say today at, let's say you're a bad son and you don't remember until 11:59 p.m. We come over, we refresh. And it's showing up in blue. We're like, we don't really want it showing up there, right? We may want it showing up right underneath the message. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to take out my today. And outside of the message text, I'm going to create a div. We'll call it class timestamp. And that's going to need a text end as well. and then we are going to put our timestamp in there. So I come over, I refresh, save, refresh, and I still have this in blue. So now I want to know what's going on here. I could go to my code and pick it apart, but I'm going to use my browser tools. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click on the little select an element to inspect, and I'm going to click on my today at 11:59. So I come in here, I scroll down, and I see my background blue is coming from my col 10. So I'm going to hop back to my CSS, and I'm realizing my entire column is now a blue background. So let's look at this. We don't want it on the column, and we don't want it really on the individual message. We just want it on the message text. So I'm going to, instead of targeting my col 10, I am going to just target my message text. So I save, I come over, I refresh, and now we've got it just where we need it. So let me leave it here and give you guys a second to catch up.
Hello, Max. This is Latonia. I don't think I put my hi mother in the right place. I think I have one too many divs.
Okay.
Just trying to figure that out.
You should have your div, other than the container, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 levels deep.
4 levels deep. Thank you.
Not including container, which is the very top one.
Hey, Max, can you move the style sheet more to the right?
Yep, shouldn't be too much hiding out over there, but that should be
No,
everything
but it
there.
helps me, like, I
Sure.
can't see it mentally. I have something wrong.
You want to share your screen? Let me stop the share, and then you should be able to. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I just skipped a div or something. I don't.
Oh, okay. Then I'll leave it up and
Yeah, yeah.
Excuse me, Max. I apologize. It's Latonia again.
go for it.
The blue, did we have that on the date? I mean, on the timestamp also, or was it just on the mom?
Just on the mom,
Okay.
just on the message.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to clean that up in just one moment.
Okay.
I thought I read that Zoom had added thumbs down, but I don't see it. So give me a thumbs up if you're ready to keep going, or an open mouth if you're still working. Okay. I got no open mouths, so we're gonna keep rolling. Okay, so
Wait. What? Hold on. At the end of your code, like under timestamp, you have 4 divs. I don't know. My
1, 2, 3, 4, and then the body. Yes.
okay. I don't know. Mine looks like yours, but I only have 3, but it's working. I'll just
Keep
add
rolling
another
with
one.
it.
Huh?
I may have more divs than we need. Right now, you know, I the way I kind of write code is like, am I going to need to style this? Or am I going to need to hook into this down the road? So it is entirely possible that you could do this with less divs.
Okay. I was just making sure.
Anyone else? Okay, so let's look at this again. That today at 11:59 looks a little big to me, and the black is really standing out. So I'm going to grab my timestamp, and I am going to say the color is, I don't know, let's try dark gray. And take a look at that. Yeah, that's kind of fine. Let's shrink that up. So we'll do a font dash size of, I don't know, say 10 pixels and see what that looks like. Fresh. Yeah, it's kind of looking good, right? All right, so let's clean up this this being too large. Because we really only want it to show up on a high mother, and you know what? That doesn't have enough spacing around it. So it's actually going to take me a minute to figure out how we can get our message to not be that big. So let's start with our message text, and we're going to put that in a p tag and move it to the class to the p tag. I'm going to refresh, and it's not going to work. Text and timestamp. Display block. What happens if I make that a span tag instead? Aha! Okay. So what was happening there is we had that as a p tag or a div, and both of those default to display block. Block is always going to default to the biggest thing, right? The 100% width. It's going to fill whatever space you give it. So instead, we switch this to a span tag, and the span tag is going to say, oh, this is inline text. You want us to show this as if it's just, you know, text inline. So what we did is we left our text end up here, but we wrapped our text in a span tag here, which is poorly formatted. Oh, Prettier hates me. Okay, well, it's a span tag. And we left our text end up at the top. And you know what? We can clean this up a little bit. We can move our text end up to our column and then get rid of an entire div. I'm going to share this code in Slack.
You can probably take text end off the timestamp class too, right?
Good call. Confirm that it worked. It should. Yep. shared in the student pasted code C2 channel. So if it's easier for you to read the code off of Slack, you're welcome to do that there. Give me an open mouse if you're still working and a thumbs up if you're ready to keep going. See one open mouth. I'll give everyone one more minute and then we'll keep going. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. All right, so we are looking here. This is kind of looking good, but you are going to be amazed at how quickly we can make this little thing turn into looking like a text bubble. So we are going to come here, and what we want to target is that message text, right? Because we've got our timestamp down here, and that should be outside of the bubble. So I'm going to go to my message text, and I am just going to add, I would like some space, but I would like it space to include the background. So what target am I going to use?
Is it background?
No, we've got our background here, but I would like some space to kind of show up around this. The problem is that I can't use margin on that, because if I add margin, it is going to add it outside of the background. So we want to add it inside. So you guys got it. We're going to use padding. So we're going to come here and we are going to say padding. And let's just start with 10px and see how that looks. So we'll save that and go, yeah, okay, that's not too bad. We are going to use some margin around that. So our timestamp is now not part of that. So we are going to go back to our message text and let's add margin bottom of, let's try 5px on both sides. And I'll do 10 on the top. Let's just see what that looks like. Maybe not enough. So let's pop in here and I'm going to go to my margin bottom and I'm just going to use the up arrows and I'm going to see that is not doing anything. Because, let me guess. So we can't use margin because our display type is not block, it's inline. And so the margin is fighting us a little bit. So let me refresh back to what it is. And let's see if we can cheat. Let's go to our today at 11:59. And let's see if we can add margin to that. So we're going to do a margin top and we'll do 10px. And now that moved it down. So we're totally going to cheat. We're going to take our margin off of here. And then on our timestamp, we'll do a margin top of 10px. So we will save that. Joey does have a good suggestion of we can change this to an inline block display type, and that will allow us to use margin. But let's try this first. So we've proven this worked. And so we can, multiple ways of skinning a cat in CSS. What Joey was suggesting is that we can actually take the margin top off the timestamp, and then up in our message, we can change this to display inline block. So you get the best of both worlds. You get an inline element, but it's telling the browser, hey, treat it as inline, but make it a hybrid so you can also use the block properties. And so you notice that automatically kind of moved our timestamp to exactly where we wanted it. So that's probably the cleaner solution. So we're going to roll with that. So I'm going to come back to my code and we are going to refactor. So I'm going to take the margin top out. And then for our message text, we are going to display as inline block. So we're going to save that. We're going to come over, we're going to refresh, and it stays the same. So there's one thing that's kind of screaming to me that is wrong with this design. Can anyone see it or guess what it is? The border radius on the corner. You guys got it. So all I have to do is go to my message text and I can do a border dash radius. And I believe if I do 100%, I'm going to make it a complete circle. Okay, maybe that's a little too much. So let's go back in here and let's play around with a different value. We can make it maybe 30px and come in here and refresh. That doesn't look terrible to me. And so I always like to take a minute here and kind of appreciate the fact that with 36 lines of HTML and only 22 lines of CSS, wow, I had my coffee way too early and it has faded out of me. With just this, we are able to complete something that actually looks kind of like a message. So we're going to keep rolling here. Shout out to Joey for the inline block suggestion. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. Can you tell that I am much more a back-end guy than a front-end guy for my CSS? So we're going to keep rolling here. I want to get the user message showing up, and then we will figure out if we have time to get our message bar, our input bar at the bottom showing, and then we will take a break either before or after that. Okay, so let's keep rolling here. I am going to pop over here, and I am going to copy most of my row and my message. So it is helpful if you click here, you can see it's going to highlight wherever your closing div is. I know a lot of people like to put the like HTML comments of like div starts here, div ends here. I think that's really helpful as when you're learning to code to match those things up. But in professional code, anyone who is a senior dev, I've never seen them leave HTML comments in, at least around opening and closing tags. So if it is helpful for you, this is just your code. It is completely fine to, add a comment in here and say closing of message. But for me, I like to just click there. And because my indentation is lined up, I can really see that this line is containing my entire message. So I'm going to take that whole thing, copy and paste it. But because that's a pretty big block of code, I'm going to save that, jump over here and refresh, and just make sure that it's showing up and that in our console, we don't have anything screaming at us. So we don't. So I am going to take my div col2 and I'm going to get rid of it because I don't want any offset for user message. I don't want it to kind of show up a little to the right. Then I am going to go into my message text, and instead of just calling it message text, I'm going to call it user message text. And then in my timestamp, I'm also going to call that user timestamp. Now, the true front-end developer may change this class name to say user message, and then they would target all of the classes inside of user message. You totally could do that. We are just going to change our 2 class names here. And then we want to think about what we want the styling to look like. The timestamp, we want to be dark gray, and we want to still have a font size of 10px. So you know what? I'm actually going to change that back and leave that be just the timestamp. But our user message, we don't want it to be blue. We don't want the color to be white. We do want some padding and that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to make our user message text. And we are going to add a background of, let's see what light gray looks like. And our color we're going to leave as black. We still want some padding around it. So we'll do a padding of 10px. We still want it to display as an inline block. And we still want a border radius of 30px. So I just want to take a minute to say there are multiple ways we could approach this. The way we did it is we changed the class and then we repeated all of these properties, right? That is not considered dry. We're repeating a lot of our code here, right? That's not something that we want to do. So the cleaner way of probably doing this is saying message text, and now all of a sudden we are going to reuse all of this code. But we are also going to apply the user message text. So the user message text is just going to take all of this code, still going to apply it because we have the message text on it. But we also have user message text, which is going to set the background and the color. And then these 3 properties are going to cascade down onto our div as well. So let's take a look at that. We're going to save, we're going to go over, we're going to refresh. And okay, it's not as bad as I thought. That's kind of how I wanted it to show up, right? But it's what's going on with that positioning. So we're going to pop open here. We're going to look at this. And we've got our col 10. And by hovering over it, I can see how wide that is. But the problem is we've got our text end. So I think getting rid of that will fix it. But just to double check, I can come in here and just remove that. And all of a sudden, it jumps over to exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to hop over to my code. I'm going to take out my text end. And I am going to take a breath. Let you guys catch up. And if you have questions about any of this, it's not just about getting it working, it's about understanding why it's working the way it is. And I'm going to copy and paste the code into the channel because Karen is a good TA and reminds me to do things like that.
My top margin on the header is not showing up.
Okay. Alina, I don't see a problem with that code, which probably means it's an issue in your HTML.
See, I think it's in my style CSS though, because usually like in yours, your inline dash block is highlighted in green, it looks like, but
Yep.
mine's just gray. Like the whole line is gray.
Let me, whoever wants to share their screen, Alina, let's do your, can you share your screen?
Yep, give me 1 second. Is it showing?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't showing up as blue anymore. And then when I'm in
Okay.
my style CSS,
Yeah, if
like this
you,
line is,
we're working on message text there with
Yes, yes.
proper camel case, but when we go to our index.html, we've got a very aggressive M
where
in
user,
our first message.
right here,
Yeah.
message. Oh, wow. Okay. That'll probably. Cool. Okay, thank you.
All right. Who else was having a problem?
I had mentioned that my margin on the top over message with mom on the header, is not showing. Yeah, Sarah says hers isn't either in the chat. And I don't think Alina's was either when she just shared her screen now.
So that very well could be. Let me share my screen and let's see if we can debug it together.
Okay.
So I'm gonna refresh here. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna grab my header, and my header has that crossed out. It's gonna tell me why it has it crossed out. No, it's just gonna be a pain.
In one of
Curious.
the previous modules, when we were doing the exercises to try to override Bootstrap, I found it very difficult to change the margins and the padding.
Yeah, so one thing we can do, a header may be built into, see, it's even overriding it on our, oh, you know what it is? It's our, because we have a row tag on it, it is setting that margin top by default. So there are two things we could do. We could say target the row, the header row. I think that's without a space. And that would make it work. So we basically said here, target the thing that is both a header and has the class of .row on it. So we could do that. We could do something kind of dumb and just target that row. But the problem with doing that is now that is going to impact every row that we have. right? And it's like, oh, we don't want that. So this is probably the best solution, is target the header row. We could also move a row into its own. We could have the header, the div that has the class row on it, and then the H1 inside of it. Or theoretically, we could just take out that whole row, because we aren't really using the grid inside of there. And so we could also, now we have to take that out and refresh. And
No,
that also works.
get out of here.
Other questions? Good question, and good job noticing that. Yeah, that's definitely something that we want to fix. So again, we could have, I just removed the row class from here. We could fix it in our CSS by adding just .row here and leaving our row class on the header. But I realized that because we weren't using the grid at all in the header, we also didn't need the row on it. But that was a good opportunity to go in and kind of figure out why our margin was getting overridden. And we were able to see that if I put that back on there. Because the margin top was set in our .row, which is coming from grid from our CSS. So I came back here and I just popped out our row because that's not helping us at all. And I refreshed, and now we got our margin.
Thanks. I also don't remember seeing that, like putting .row for one of the classes inside. So that was good to know in general too.
Yes. Okay. Do we want to keep going for our input and then we'll call it? Yes, we did put our bootstrap style in our index.html. If we didn't, we wouldn't get the magic of the grid working or text end or any of that. And so that is lingering right up here. And I got that from getbootstrap.com, and then you click get started, and then you can grab that link tag. I did break best practice and I didn't pull in our script tag because I knew we weren't working with any components that required the bootstrap JavaScript. But it is best practice when you pull in the link tag to also grab the script tag, because things like header don't work without the script tag. That bootstrap code does not change every time. If you look here, they are pointing you at version 5.0.0. That 5.0.0 is something called semantic versioning, and it is something that is used across the software industry. So it is also called, the way they do it is it's called a major.a-minor.patch. So if you're just fixing a bug for a user and there are no new features with it, you change what is called the patch number, or the number at the end. And so if Bootstrap released a little fix and they're like, oh, we broke something, no new features, no new changes, just this little thing gets fixed, they would change what is called the patch number. If they released a couple new features, but it wasn't a complete overhaul, they would change what is called the minor number. And if they were releasing a whole new version with a bunch of new features and apps built in and maybe some breaking changes, they change the major version. And so that is a common thing to see when you're writing your own software and you're releasing it to the public. You want to know what version they're on, because they may have some bug in their code that you have already fixed. And so the semantic versioning major minor patch is just a good thing to kind of hear and completely forget about until 6 months down the road, until you're shipping your own software. And you go, I wonder how people do their version numbers. I see those 2 decimal points a lot. And so that's just a good thing to have in the back of your head. So it does not change every time, but every time they change this version number, you can change your version number and your code to get the later version. But you do have to change this integrity as well. this is getting a little more technical, and you'll learn about this in the security module. But it is basically saying that when you get the file, this is telling the browser to check the file to make sure they are sending you the file you expect to get. So when they do an upgrade, it's best to replace this entire link tag with the newer version of Bootstrap, because it has this integrity thing in here, which is a newer, more complicated version of pulling in links and making sure you're getting what you requested. So no, if you're using an older version, it will not compromise your code. As long as the integrity and the href match each other, you should be fine. You get the JavaScript link for Bootstrap. We didn't end up using it, but if you go back to the Bootstrap homepage and go to get started, the JavaScript bundle tag is right there. Okay, so we are here. We're going to push forward just a little bit more. And we are going to get our text input to show up and maybe our send button. And then we will call it for most of our HTML and CSS and switch over to JavaScript land. Sound good? Okay. So I'm going to come over here, and at the outside of my div class messages, I would like to add another div class, and I'm going to call it input bar. And I'm going to use the row tag on that. And then I am going to do a div class equals col, and we'll make it a 10. And I'll say message bar here. And then I'm going to do another div class, and I am going to do a col2 on that. And I'm going to say send button. You guys you don't have to code along with all of this. Just wait 1 second. I want to show you how it's showing up. So again, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh, and you can kind of see how that's going to work by default, right? We're going to have our send button over on the right, and we're going to have our message bar kind of here. So now I am going to make my input work. So now you can start coding along. I'm going to do an input, and I'm going to use a class called form control. And we should probably put a type equals text on that. Form control is a CSS Bootstrap class. If you wanted to know where I got that, you could easily go to the documentation, go to inputs, and it would show up right away. And then same for my send button. I'm going to do a button, and that is going to have a class of BTN and BTN success. And that will have the word send in it. I'm going to save that. I'll come back in 1 minute, I promise. Give you time to catch up. So that shows up. It's kind of how I want. But my send button isn't exactly ideal. So I'm going to come back in here, and I am going to say, hey, in my input bar, find something that has BTN and make the width of it 100%. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh, and I get my send button to be that full width that I wanted. Okay, all of that looks good, but it'd be nice if there was kind of some like separation between the top and the bottom. So I'm going to come back over. I'm going to target my input bar. I'm going to add maybe some padding to the top of it. That's 10px. Then I will add a border that is 1px solid, and we'll reuse our CCC from up here, which just happens to be a nice light gray that I happen to have memorized. So I come over here, I will refresh, and ooh, that's not exactly what I wanted. Let's come over here. My border, I just want my border on the top. So we'll save, we'll refresh. Okay, that looks good. But every time I send a message, I don't want my bar to go lower and lower and lower. So what I am going to do is I'm going to say, hey, take the whole input bar and we are going to position it, and we're going to say we're going to give you a fixed position for that. And in there, we are going to bottom 0. So just anchor it to the bottom of the screen. Now, I have a bad feeling that this is going to do something weird. Well, we got it to the bottom of the screen, but it's doing some weird things there. I believe what is going to happen is it doesn't know what width 100% anymore is. Yeah, it's going to do all kinds of weird stuff. Joey, if you're watching and have any suggestions, I'm listening. We need to figure out how to get this bar, because when we do a position fixed, basically what is happening is it's taking the entire div and removing it from the container. It's removing it from everywhere. And it's just saying, oh, you want it at the bottom, let's throw it at the bottom. But because that fixed position is not relative to our container, which is setting the height and width of our messages in here, we can even see that, right? It is, oh, okay, I will. It is, the container is adding that orange area for us. So when we do that fixed bottom and look, it's like, it's having trouble understanding where our container is. So we're going to go to the Bootstrap documentation and go to layout.
Max, we can't see your screen.
No one can? Can any of you see my screen?
I can see it on both
Okay.
mine.
Okay. Must be, Alina, maybe try dropping out and coming in. Okay. So let's look at our Bootstrap documentation. And what it is saying is we've got vertical alignment of our Bootstrap. Well, that's exactly what we wanted. So we've got row, and we've got row align items end. So I've actually never used this before. So let's see what happens. We're going to come over here. We're going to add our align items end. And then I am going to take out my position fixed, which was causing problems, and my bottom 0. Come over here, go to my code, refresh. Okay, not exactly what we wanted. So let's look over here. I believe what the problem is here is we've got our container. Let's make sure we've got our container at the top. Input bar, padding top, border top. And we are inside of our container. I wonder if it needs this align items center. So let's try and take that and put it up on our messages and see if that's enough maybe to push it down. Let's get really aggressive and go to our align item start and put that on our header. And I think, you know what, we're going to have to add our header back onto here and add our header back to our CSS. I'm playing here, so wait a minute to follow along if you are following along with me. That didn't do it either. Align item start. Oh, this probably needs to be a row. That's a row. Well, I like what it's trying to do there. We could solve this with flex, and we might end up having to do that. Let's try, no, because that's gonna space things out, column wrapping. Look at our code one more time before I throw the towel in on this. I'm just going to take out my classes. Yeah, Joey is saying this is where Flexbox helps out. And it is entirely possible that we could get this working with the bootstrap, but
Can I
am
throw an idea out there?
sure.
Could we just make it, put it in a bottom nav bar?
We could. I think going the flex route is going to be a better way of doing it.
Okay.
So let me just remove this out, and we're gonna get to flexing. Okay. So basically what we want to do is we want to say that this middle messages section is going to, we want that to be the biggest part of the screen. And so I believe what we can do is we can say flex 1. Oh, you know what? We're going to take a break for now. And when you come back, I will have a solution for you. I just need a minute to play around with it. And then I promise I will explain what I did. I'm sure we're probably going to use something like flex grow.
Flex omnipotent. It takes
Yeah.
over the page.
It'll take me a minute, but I promise to explain it when you guys get back. So let's take a break now. We'll circle back at 7:15. And then when I have my camera back on, I'm happy to answer any questions as to where you guys are stuck at. I'm also going to copy and paste my code into Slack in case you need to reference it there.
Yeah, I want to fill in a couple gaps for both the CSS2, right?
Yes, I will grab that too and paste that.
And when you're not busy trying to hang wallpaper with one arm, I did throw a couple more questions about the whole bootstrap link thing in the chat. So you can just chat me back or whatever's good.
Okay, sounds good. I will be
Some of
back
the stuff I know and I just don't remember.
I will be back in a couple minutes when I have this figured out.
Hey, Susan, did you happen to, you're on mute, but I was wondering if you got a hold of them about doing their thing on a weekend instead of like a weekday. We talked about it at the coaching the other day. Because I would totally be down for doing
you mean
that.
one of those meetups? No, I didn't reach out yet just because I was trying to work on the homework the whole time. So I didn't do
We're all
anything.
beat. I just didn't know. If you do, let me know, please. I'd totally be down to meet up with some of you guys and go do that. I'd love to network like that. I just obviously we can't during class. So
Yes, no, I agree. Yeah, I just haven't done it yet. And it's been raining.
yeah, no, I mean, no pressure. Just if you get to it, just let me know. That was all. I'm excited. I'd like to do it. And also that gives me a chance. God love my kids, but that gives me a chance with adults. So I think it would be good to go out and, network like that. So let me know if you do, please. Thank you.
I've got a solution figured out that I'm not proud of. Flex is definitely the right answer, but I've got something in my back pocket just in case. Did anyone have questions?
Do you have anything currently in script? I apologize. I came in late for a doctor's appointment, but I didn't see the script file. Is there anything in there at the moment?
We've got a console log hello world in there, and that is it. So no.
Okay. When we get to that point, that would be the time for me to probably ask questions, right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking, because I'm good on what we have now. I just wanted to verify.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
We haven't gotten into any of the interactivity, but that's when we're going to start hooking into the form submission and getting the data showing up and all of that stuff. So yeah, you're probably good to go until we start with the JavaScript stuff. Anyone else have questions? Carolyn, let me answer your question. So you can see the order of it in the Slack code that I posted. I always put style tags up in the header because you want your style tags to load first before anyone sees anything on your page. And then the JavaScript tag I put before the closing HTML, but after the body, because we normally want that code to load and run after your content has loaded, but you still want the ability to override it in your own script.js. So that's just where I put it. There are newer ways of using a tag called defer, which will tell the browser to load it more slowly, like there isn't a rush to load it. But historically, script tags go under the closing body tag, link tags go up in the head tag, but it's not an absolute requirement to put them there.
So the Bootstrap script tag would hang out with the JavaScript one down at the bottom of the ocean. Who comes first?
Bootstrap and then you. So you can always override Bootstrap in your own code.
I mean, at the end, when you have the JavaScript script in there.
Bootstrap comes first, and then your script comes
and
second.
JavaScript, and then just like the HTML order. Okay, thank you. And what did we console log? I feel like I'm falling asleep with my eyes open because I thought I was paying attention, but I keep missing these things out.
We just put a console log test or hello world or something in there.
Okay,
it wasn't
great.
anything important.
Thank you. But yeah, it's a good way to make sure something's working. All right. Thank you very much.
No problem. Anyone else have questions? Okay.
Oh, I have a question. Hey, Max.
Shoot.
Sorry,
I was going for the mute button and I couldn't get my mouse over there.
Just when you thought it was safe to rest, I have a question. I'm doing my capstone and I want to know if there's a way to, or do I need to get rid of normalized.css?
If you're using Bootstrap, I would not recommend using normalize in addition to Bootstrap.
Okay, but I put the normalize in first and then said, no, I want to use Bootstrap and I can't get rid of the normalized file unless I start my capstone over again. Karen and I were working together today over Zoom trying to get things set up, and I'm wondering now if it's because I now have Bootstrap, well, CSS and the normalize.
No,
why we're having an issue with.
You really shouldn't have to start your project over again. Normalize, you should just be able, if you have normalize.css downloaded, you should be able to delete that file. And then in your HTML file, you would just need to make sure you remove the link href equals normalize.css.
Okay, so I just delete the link?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Except for the nav bar at the bottom, Susan, that's what it should be looking like. I mean, you should have your input bar. It just won't be at the bottom of the page.
Right, yes, like, because you figured that out, we didn't do it yet.
Yes, I totally
yes.
cheated. Flex is
Okay.
totally the right answer to use on that, but we'll get into that in 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question about the code at the very bottom of the CSS, the input bar and the button, the 100%. Is there not a comma between there just because we're using Bootstrap and Bootstrap doesn't do commas? Or
Where are we?
the very bottom of the CSS, the input bar dot input bar dot button. At first I had it dot input bar dot button like all together without the space because I was thinking about what you had done with the header dot row and it wasn't working. And then when I put the space in, it worked. And I was like, what's going on there? And then I realized there's probably would normally be a comma between those two and there's not because of Bootstrap, maybe?
The comma would say that you would want to apply it to every input bar and to every button
Right.
on the screen. So what the space says instead is apply it to the input bar that has a button underneath it, somewhere underneath it.
So you don't have to use the arrow, the like
arrow,
tag,
the arrow says that it's a direct descendant. So basically it would say, look for the input bar, and then the only two direct descendants would be col and col2. So if we wanted to use the arrow, we would have to say something like target input bar, look in col2, and then look for the button inside of that.
Okay.
So whenever you use the arrows, you're saying direct descendant, like literally go through the tree to get down to the button. When you just use a space, it's just saying look for input bar and then look for any button inside input bar at any level.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we are, make sure I am unmuted. Yes, I am. So it's just messaging Joey back and forth. And I believe Joey comes in either next week or the week after that to start React with you guys. So that was some feedback we got from cohort 1, was that we had React too late in the curriculum. So we shifted that up. So you guys get to jump into interactivity Joey is an awesome developer. He uses React in his full-time job. So Joey was helping me out with some Flex stuff, and he sent me a code snippet, which we will try towards the end of the evening. But I'm going to show you the hackier solution that I came up with. So you guys may have talked a little bit about SAS with Caitlin, or SCSS, and how that allowed you to do some mathematical calculations in it. Well, CSS, native CSS heard about that and got jealous and said, well, we can support some calculations as well. And so what you can do, let me just make sure let me comment this out. So basically, when we're looking at our code, we go, all right, this is a fixed height. We know what that height is, and we know what this height is. So instead of trying to get this to the bottom of the screen, what if we tell this to be the height of the screen minus this section up at the top? So what we do is we can come in and we can grab our messages. And if we come in here and say, hey, I would like my height to say, let's say 150 pixels. Well, that didn't make much change. Let's bump it up to 290 pixels, right? That is, Karen corrected me there. You get 2 weeks of Ryan first to do API calls and fun stuff like that. And then you get Joey for 3 weeks in React. So thank you for the correction. So that height is doing what we want, right? We can see, we can get that at the right spot. But the problem is what happens if I change my screen size? So what we can do is we can say, and let me just take something off that's bothering me. This row align item start shouldn't be there. And that should. Now I'll fix that in a second. So what we can say is our height is going to be 100, and then we use the letters V and H. And that says vertical height or viewport height. So it is basically taking the height of my window and making this entire thing it. The problem is we don't want it to be the height of the entire window. We want it to be the height of the entire window minus this section up here, minus this down here, because we need room for it there. So we can actually combine the pixels and the viewport height. And we can say calc, start with 100%, 100 of the viewport height, and then subtract, let's just say 50 pixels from it. Well, that still isn't quite right, but we can start adjusting our subtraction number here until we get our input bar exactly what we wanted it to be. So basically, instead of trying to get this to be at the bottom of the screen, instead we just made this height push the input bar down to where we want it. So if we go to our inspect, we can see our input bar there. And if we hover over our messages, we can see our messages input or our messages div, and then we can see our header all the way up at the top. So, and even if I adjust the screen size, you notice my bar is staying exactly where I want it to, because CSS is calculating out whatever 100% of the viewport height is, and then it is taking off 130 pixels, which happens to be the height of this plus the height of this whole bar. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to see if I added flex anywhere, because I broke messages somewhere. Yeah, I don't want that. Okay. And so I'm going to set my messages height to 100 VH minus 130 PX. Now, one thing to note here, calc is even more specific than CSS is. If you put a space after the 100 and between the VH, or if you forget a space in that subtraction, it will just completely ignore that whole parameter. Calc is very, very particular about where it has its spaces and its operators. So it is a calc, a parenthesis, the number V, and then the letters VH space minus space the next number px and then the closing there. So we're going to save that. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to refresh. I'm going to save and refresh. Okay, I've got another problem here, but we'll get to that. The bar is at the bottom of the screen, so that's good. I broke something here and my message is kind of down in the center, so we need to fix that next. But I will leave this up for a second to have you guys catch up, and I will try and figure out why my messages are up there. What did I do to deserve this hatred? Do you guys need to see any of the code? I will leave this up and I'm going to grab this and pull it off to my other monitor to hopefully see what's going on here.
So Max, I just wanted to understand this better. So so messages in style CSS would be like all of the messages. Then message text would be the blue text.
Yep.
And then user message text would be the gray text.
Correct.
And then we have dot message. What would that one be? That would be the input bar.
Yeah, that is applying to both the blue part and the little timestamp underneath it.
Okay. And then the input bar would be the input bar, and then the input bar button would be the send button.
You got it.
Okay.
And I just took the row off of this because that was causing our messages to space out weirdly. So taking that extra row off is what solved our weird spacing issue.
That's the first div class under the ending of header, correct?
Yeah, yes, I took the row off of that.
Excuse me, Max.
Yep.
When I added that row in, and then it made my send button snap to the bottom and stay there. But when I took it out, now it's not doing that. So did I miss something else?
Mine's the same as Latonia's. When I removed the row.
When you removed this messages row, it did that. Did you add your messages height calc in your CSS?
Yeah, I did.
Let me save my code, make sure I don't have that problem. Nope. Okay. Latonia, why don't you go ahead and share your screen? And I want to re-emphasize this. Flex is the better solution for this. The calc is not the cleanest way of doing it. And if we have time at the end of class, I want to try a solution Joey proposed with Flex. I will see if that works. If it doesn't, I will send a code sample tonight to get it working. Okay, we got our div class. We've got our messages. That input bar row should be indented one line, or that whole block should be over by
This
one.
here?
Yeah. I'm sorry. unindented. So Shift Tab will move it back over. And that's where it should be, because it should be outside of the messages div. So take your, hold on. Got your col 10. Let's make sure, I think you are missing a closing div between line 48 and 49. Because messages should be over after the two message divs.
After the two messages.
Yeah, so
Wait.
between 48 and 49,
Yes.
I think you need one more div there. Yeah.
Oh, yep, that snapped it down.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. So to reiterate that, let me just share my screen quickly. Our div messages should have two divs in it, both that have row and message. And then outside of our div messages, we should have our div input bar. And our input bar has two columns in it with an input and a button. And then we close out our div for the input bar. And then at the very end, we close out our div for the container. So we basically have three divs going on here. We have the header, which isn't technically a div, but let's call it one. We've got our div class messages and then our div class input bar. And so because we've got those three things structured out, then we can just target the thing in the middle and say, hey, be so big, and then subtract out the thing at the top and the bottom. And that's what's setting our height properly for us. Give me an open mouth if you're working, or a thumbs up if you're ready to keep going. Okay, we'll give everyone two more minutes.
Can I share my screen really quick? Or I don't know if anybody's looking at the code.
Go for it.
So my input bar is all the way at the bottom.
Yep.
Like Latonia's issue, but you said that we were gonna have so we have the header, then the div messages on the outside.
Yep.
And my div class input row is also on the outside. Am I missing a div? Because that lines up with that.
I think you have too many divs at the end.
Okay. If that fixed it, I don't know. No.
And then you just need to, if you go to your style sheet, I ended up changing my height from minus 130 to minus 140.
Oh my gosh, I can't type, sorry.
Yeah, that was a sneaky one that I did on the fly. So if you save that, it should move it up a little bit, give it some breathing room.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. Susan, do you want to screen share?
Yeah, because I don't know if you, I don't know. Let me share.
Okay, so you got your messages. All that it's going to take is that space between the 100 and the VH.
Right here?
No, between the 100 and then the V.
Yeah.
So
No space?
Delete that, no space, save that, and refresh. And that is why, oh, nope, I was wrong. Well, that would have broken it. Let's see if there's another spot it's broken. Minus 140.
How come it doesn't warn you?
So SCSS would, but because it's regular CSS, it doesn't. When you switch to React, you'll be using a different kind of styles, and that would warn you if something was wrong. So better tools do warn you. Let's go to your index.html. And so you have the same problem. Your input bar is inside of your messages and we want it outside of your messages.
We're here, down here.
Yeah. So if you take lines 39 through 46 and cut that.
I don't need to copy it.
No, just cut it because we're going to paste it in 1 second.
What's cut? Apple C?
Apple X. And
Okay.
then move after line 40 and enter and then paste it in there. And then save that. And now when we come back and refresh. Okay, maybe not. Let's go back to your code.
Oh, you're saying I had it in these messages? Is that what you're saying? It was in
Yes.
the same. Okay.
Yes. So div closes that div, that closes that div. We may need to try moving the div that's on line 48 to between 40 and 41.
Like eliminate this one
Yeah.
and then put it here.
Yeah. There we go. So now I would just clean up your indentation and make sure the indentation is correct. You could also cheat and use prettier. If you go,
I have that on. It should. I have that.
what's your little exclamation mark say down there? Next to
Right
prettier?
here?
Yeah. Go up just a little bit and you may need to click on it. Try saving the file again and see if it does anything. No, it's still a problem. Scroll up a little bit in that bottom window.
Sorry, I
See
gotta
if
move
it gets-
this. Yeah, let me just move my Zoom thing. It's
Yeah.
all over the place. Okay, in here.
Yeah, just scroll up just a tiny bit. Oh, too far. Just keep going down. I'm guessing that there's something missing. We're missing an opening or a closing div. You're missing a closing div on line 26. And then save, that did it.
Wait, what?
Well,
That's
that
not
broke
right.
it. All right,
That's not right.
Let's go back to your code.
Okay.
But prettier did run. So oh, now we want to move, actually that line 26 should be between line 28 and 29. And then save. And then, okay, so kind of got the timestamp at the right spot. Let's go back to your code. We've got our closing div. Okay, so we probably have the same issues in the next row message. So let's scroll down a little bit. And we've got our span, our message text, our timestamp, our call closes, our message closes. We've got our div, but now we're missing a closing div on the container at the end. So I'm thinking grab one of your divs from line 40 and put that between 48 and 49, I think. Let me double check. Yeah. Much better.
Okay.
Except your message is down at the bottom. So we've got one more div closing issue somewhere. Let's scroll up a little bit to your div messages Yeah. So delete one of your line 30s, because if we look here, let me annotate this so you guys can see. We've got our div messages here, and our div messages should have all of our messages in it, right? But if we follow this line down, we see that that div ends there. And so that's not what we want. So we want to take line 31 and wherever line 31, that closing div is. So we want to take this div, which is our closing div for messages, and put it down here instead. And save that. And this is where Prettier is helping, because it's doing all the formatting for you. So even though our divs weren't in the right order, we had the right number of them, and that's why it was kind of showing up in the browser without freaking out. So now if we go back to the browser and refresh, now we're perfect.
Oh, okay. You were able to see that through because of Prettier down below here, or no, you just kind of knew it?
No, that's just years of
following
lines.
That's what I figured.
Sometimes Prettier can help you down there, but there's a lot that shows up. If you hit the X, yeah, that will get rid of all that stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else stuck or have questions? Alina, the messages, I'm not sharing my screen. Don't tell me I'm not sharing my screen. The messages height calc 100 VH minus 140 is the part where we change the height in the center, which push the input bar down to the bottom. Anyone else have questions? So the good news is you've made it through the end of the HTML. And in only 2 hours, you were able to create something that looks like, oh, I had it open over here. That looks like a full chat app, which is pretty cool. So we want to take a minute and pat ourselves on the back because we used a little bootstrap. We used a little, but if a client asked me to build them a chat screen and I sent them this is not something that I would be disappointed with, right? This is something that I can look at this design wise and go, yeah, it had some breathing room. It had some padding. We leaned into that bootstrap grid. We were able to use the grid for both the send button and for having this be offset a little bit. So if we pull this screen size all the way in, you see how this still that breathing room looks right, and it looks right over here. If we bring it all the way, oh, I can't even go smaller. If we go down to a mobile size, you notice how that has a little breathing room there? That's what that call 2 is doing for us up at the beginning. And that's what the call 10 here is saying, don't go all the way to the end, leave some space there. Okay. Awesome progress, awesome work. This isn't the HTML module. This isn't the Bootstrap module. This is the JavaScript module. Yes, can hear you over your mutes. So what are we going to do? Well, we could go in and we could generate a to-do list, just like we did for the to-do list app, right? Of what we're working through. But Alina, you've got it right. We've got to add some functions. We've got to get some data flowing from our HTML to our JavaScript. We've got to store some of that information in our JavaScript. And then we've got to write this update.html function that's going to get it from our JavaScript data structure through a loop back out to our HTML. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to add a form in here, and we're going to actually make this entire div our form. And on our button, we are going to say our button is now going to be a type submit. And then we are going to add an ID in here that says message form. Let's call it send form. I like send form. Okay. So I'm going to grab my JavaScript. My JavaScript is now going to be in my right pane. So instead of my style sheet showing up over on the right, my JavaScript is instead. I'm going to delete out my console.log test. And how do we write some code that says when something happens? What do we put our blocks of code into? Function. So we are going to say function. And I don't know why I put an ID on my form. What I meant to say is on submit, we are going to say call the function send message. And we are going to pass in our event so we can prevent the entire page from reloading. Then in our function, we are going to create a function that says send message that takes our event. And we are going to event.prevent default. So the page does not refresh when we submit the message. And then we need to get our message that is being sent. So we're going to come over to our input and we are going to say our ID on our input is going to become message input. And then we are going to say our const message input is equal to, and what do we use to access our HTML? Not update HTML. We're not going to update the HTML yet. We're going to use element by ID. What do we need to get the element by ID? We need to access the HTML document. So we're going to say document, which is saying, hey, go get the HTML document, then get the element in that document called message input. And then, because we're writing a lot of code here that could break spectacularly, console log out the message input dot value. So let's make sure this works before I give you a break and let you catch up. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I click send. Go over to my console. Cannot read property value of null. Okay, so what that means, it's trying to read value from my message input. So we would think something is wrong there. Really, the problem's up here. My document.getElement by ID is actually the thing that failed on me. And so to prove that, I can delete out the dot value, come back over here, refresh, type in ABC, click send, and I get null. And so it can't even find the input in the first place. And that's what's causing the problem. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to grab my inspect tool. I'm going to come in here and I see my input, my class, my type, my text. Where's my ID? Well, it would help if some teacher remembered to save his code before he loaded it in the browser. So I come over here, I refresh, type in ABC, and then now in my console, I get my input in my JavaScript console. So all I need to do is come over here, add in my dot value, save it, come over, refresh it, ABC, send, and I get my ABC coming out. So that was as simple as I forgot to save my HTML file that has my added ID on it, and that caused the problem. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let you catch up if you are following along. And oh, that was a bad send. All the latest code is in Slack. In case it is more helpful there. Okay. Where are we at? Give me a thumbs up. We're good to go. Give me an open mouth. Questions? I know we just jumped from HTML and CSS land straight into JavaScript, and there are days that happens. So if we have any questions so far, I know it's only 5 lines of code, but we're doing a lot in those 5 lines of code. So if you have any questions about any of that, scream bloody murder right now and ask away. Okay. Better not hear too fast from anyone on their daily feedback tonight. Not getting the questions. All right. So we've got our message input value here, but we've got to do something with that value, right? So we want to save that value somewhere. What kind of data structure do we want to save that into? An empty array, yes, but trick question. In addition to saving the message input, what other piece of information would we want to save with that message?
Which person the message is from.
Which person the message is from, yes. We're going to kind of cheat around that. Actually, no, we're not. We do need to know who sent the message. So yes, we need to know who sent the message. And what I was thinking of was the time, which some of you got. So there are now 3 pieces of information that we need to send. So we're going to add all 3 of those pieces into I think someone already said it, an object, because we're saving multiple pieces of information. And then that object is going to go into an array because we're going to have multiple messages. So what we're going to do is we still have to start with our empty array. So we're going to say let messages equal an array. And then we are going to messages.push, and we're going to push an object into the array. And what we are going to do is we are going to say the text of the message is going to come from the message input value. And because we are the ones sending the message, we will say I sent it. It's a bad variable name, but we're going to send that. We're going to set that to true. And if I didn't send it, it will get sent to false. And we're going to do something different in the HTML based off of whether I sent it or not. If anyone has a better variable name for that, let me know. But off the top of my head, without enough caffeine in me, we're going to roll with I sent it. And then finally, we do need to save the time. So it's traditional to save the time in a variable called timestamp. Not a requirement. You can call it whatever you want, but timestamp is just a generic notion. And we are going to say store a new date. Now, new and date are 2 special words in JavaScript, just like var or let or for or any of those. And that is going to create this date object that we're able to work with down the road. So we're going to see that in a minute. So I am going to console.log our messages. And then one more thing, when we send a message, we normally want that input to clear again. So we're just going to say message input.value is equal to an empty string. So we are going to remove this console log, save. We're going to come over here. We're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC. We're going to hit send. Cleared it out for me. Console logged it for me. And hey, would you look at that? I sent that at 1951 military time. So we can even see our date object in there. That's kind of cool. All right. That's all doing what we wanted it to do. What did it not do? Didn't update the HTML. So let's get it to update our HTML. We're going to create a function. We're going to call it update HTML. By the way, you can name the function whatever you want. You say update HTML is dumb. We want to call it generate HTML, call it generate HTML, call it whatever you want. So we're going to come down here and we are going to say we need to grab our messages, right? So I am going to change my div class messages to an ID of messages. But when I do that, what's going to happen breaks my styling. So we need to go back into my style sheet and now change messages to use a # instead of the period, which is switching it from a class over to an ID. So I'm going to save that. I come back over here. I refresh. We got our styling back. So I'm going to save my style sheet. I'm going to come back in here. And now I can say const messages div is equal to document.get element by ID. And we're going to grab our messages. Now we need to work with our messages array, but because we're working over with an array, what do we need to do? An array is just a fancy word for list. So if we want to do something with each list item, we probably need to loop. So we are going to say for const message of messages. And then we're going to pump the brakes and we're going to console log out our message. So come back over here, we refresh, we type in ABC, I hit send, and I get my console log messages from line 12. Where's my line 20? Anyone see the problem? S is not the problem. We are looping over messages and we're going to log out our message. So let's maybe dive into this a little bit more. Console.log hit, just to know if that's working at the top. Maybe it's the problem with our loop. So we come back over here, we refresh, we type in ABC, we hit send, and we still only have line 12 printing out. When does our send message function run? Our send message function runs when we tell the form to submit. So it calls send message, and because it has those parentheses there, it knows it wants to run send message. So it comes over here and it runs all of this code. Now, where do we tell it to update HTML? We've told it what to do when we tell it to use update HTML, but we need to tell it, hey, when you're done sending the message, call update HTML. Because this is in a function, it will not run the function until we tell it, hey, we would like update HTML to happen now. And that, again, is the difference between those parentheses there. Without those parentheses there, it's like, yeah, what do you want me to do with update HTML? And what we want to do is we want to say run update HTML. And so that's what those parentheses, in addition to letting us pass in a parameter, it is also saying now go run that code. So we come down here, we refresh, we type in ABC, and now not only do I have my console log happening on line 12, my hit runs and I get access to my object. Okay, now we're making progress. I'm going to clear my console. I'm going to type in ABC again. Now I got two things in my array. Hit ran once, but now I've got access to both of the objects that are in my array. And you notice the timestamp is a little different. There are a couple seconds between them. Okay, all cool. So we've got our loop running. We need to start building out our HTML to update. So we are going to say let HTML to update equals a blank string. And then we are going to, before we generate out our HTML, we need to figure out whether the user sent it or whether that's a message that got sent to them. So we are going to say if message.I sent it, and you could add is equal to true here, but we don't need it because by default, it's going to look, and if it is true, it's going to run this code. Otherwise, it's going to run code down in the else statement. So we are going to say, if I sent the message, then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to take this entire div, and I'm going to say HTML to update plus equals, and then I'm going to use my template literal. I'm going to scoot this code over. So we've got all of this stuff that it is going to add, but we need to get fancy, right? Because we don't want it to say, hi, mother, happy Mother's Day to you. We want it to say message dot what? Not value, because value is the input value. We want it to pull it out of the object that we saved. And so we are going to output message.text. Where did we get text? Because we told it when we added the object to the array, that's when we saved the value into it from the form input. So I'm going to console log out our message here. And I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to type in ABC and hit send. And again, we've got access to the object here. So if we wanted to get access to the timestamp, we would use .timestamp. If we wanted to get access to the text, we would use the text. Okay, so I sent the message. Nothing's showing up here. We're missing one final step. What are we missing? Well, I guess technically two. We've done all of this work to update our HTML to update, but then we need to go shove that HTML back in to the actual HTML. So we're going to come after, outside of our for loop, we are going to say messages div dot inner HTML is equal to the lovely HTML that we just created. So we're going to save, come in here. We're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC, and we hit send, and there's my ABC. And I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to type in DEF, and I'm going to send, and I get my DEF. All right, pretty good. So we've got a little more to do, and then we'll pause. Today at 11:59. Well, it's not 11:59. Something's wrong there. So we're going to work with the date, and then we'll call it a night and give you some time to work on this. So we've got our message text coming in, but we've got today at 11:59. So that's not right. We want to use when the message was actually sent, right? So we're going to come in here, and we're going to just say message and use that lovely timestamp that we created. What could go wrong? So we're going to throw the timestamp in there, and we're going to come over here and refresh, and I'm going to type in ABC and hit send, and ooh, well, that's technically the time that I sent it, but it's pretty ugly. Monday, May 10th, 2001 GMT -0400 Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, well, we want to work with that a little bit, right? So we are going to create a new function called format date. And this is where I would hear every instructor who is going to teach from here on out say, use a library, use a date library, use someone else's code that formats dates for you. And they are totally correct. If you were working on any production app, you are probably going to want to use some date formatter that makes life easier on you. However, we're going to go through kind of the hard way of doing it, so we get an idea of what we're working with and how we can format this together. So we are going to say console.log, and we need access to the date. So we need to use because we're using a function and we're getting data from somewhere else, how do we get data passed into a function? Parameter, you guys got it. It's funny seeing all of you type all at once to see who can send it first, and then they all come in on the chat. So we are going to say, hey, instead of the message timestamp, go use format date, and then in those parentheses, pass in the message timestamp. Then up here, we can say, hey, go get the timestamp. And then in our console log, we can get the timestamp. And because it is a date object, we can get the hours. We're going to save that. We're going to come over. We're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC and hit send. Now we got undefined up here. All right, that's fine. We're still working on getting that to work. But look what came out here, 20. Okay, well, it's military time. So if you do 20 minus 12, what do you get? 8. It is 8 o'clock. Okay, so what we can say is our const hours is equal to our timestamp get hours. And our minutes is going to be timestamp. We're going to get really creative here. Get minutes. Okay. Now, we need to do something if we don't use military time by default, right? So what we need to do is we need to say if hours is greater than 12, and then we're going to say let AM, let's say let is AM equal true. And if hours is greater than 12, what are we going to do? We're going to say is AM is equal to false. And then we are also going to grab our hours and subtract 12 from that. And at this point, you should have alarm bells going off because we just subtracted something from a const. And so we need to change our const here back to a let because we're going to change the hours. Okay. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's test all of this. We're going to console log out our hours, our minutes, and our is AM. We're going to save all of that. We're going to come over here. We're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC and send. And we got 8, and we got 5, and we got false. All right, that's doing pretty good. So let's pull it all together. How we use the parameter to get information into the function. How do we get information out of the function? Return, you guys got it. So we are going to return spelled correctly, and then we're going to use our fancy template literal. So we are going to return our hours. Then we're going to put a timestamp, a colon in the middle of it. And then we are going to return our minutes. And then we're going to do a space. And we're going to say, if it is AM, return AM. Otherwise, make it PM. Save that. Come over here. We're going to refresh. Type in ABC. And we get 8:06 PM. Almost there. So we just need one more if statement, right? If minutes is less than 10, then minutes is going to be equal to the minutes with a 0 in the front of it. Anyone see any other issue? Okay. Need to change our const to a let because we are modifying what the value of minutes is. We're going to save. We're going to come over here. We're going to refresh, type in ABC, and we get 8:07 p.m. And if we wait a minute and send another message, I promise you it would be 8:08 p.m. We can get fancy if we wanted to and say, let seconds equals timestamp dot get seconds. And we need to copy this code and change it to seconds, seconds, seconds. And we can add our seconds right there. Okay. Come over here. We're going to refresh, type in ABC, and we get our seconds. And I type in DEF and I send it, and I get the seconds working as well. Okay. Feel like I lost some of you on that last part, so we are going to call it here. I am going to put all of this code in Slack. Stop sharing my screen. Put it in Slack. Here.
So are we gonna learn tomorrow how to be like the other person, or however the other person replies? Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to emulate whether we're the other person or not, but we are going to use what is called a set timeout to make it so after we send a message, there's a little bit of a delay, and then the user sends a message. The person you're texting sends a message. Actually going to create a little bit of a bot. Not going to be sentient or use any intelligent content, but we are kind of creating a little bit of a bot without me realizing that we are. So the JavaScript, the index.html, and the style sheet are now all in Slack. I'm going to take a quick break to add all of these to GitHub, and then I will be around to answer any questions that you guys have. And just like last week, your homework for this weekend will be submitting this app. There may be some other homework, but this will be the big project. So it is worthwhile you coding along as we go and trying to stay up with it because I will be grading it next weekend. Any questions before I put this stuff in GitHub?
Just a quick one related to CSS. When you put the code, the HTML code into the function, we lost our padding around the text. Do you do inline styling for that, or is there some way to like link the CSS into the script?
Great question. So I believe what happened here is I forgot to copy this div class, and that was missing here because we've got opening div, closing div, opening div, closing div, and then this closing div matches this div. So I missed copying this div in. So if I save that and refresh and send ABC, now it shows up at the right spot.
So they are linked through the HTML, I mean, through the index.html file anyway.
What's happening is this is loading the first time we load the page, but then as soon as this function runs for the first time, it's overwriting anything that was in the messages div with anything that we generate out in here. So because I was missing this opening div like we had in the HTML, that's why it was a little bit off because it didn't have the row with it.
Right, and then when it updates that, it grabs the CSS because, yeah, everything's linked to the HTML.
Correct. Yep.
And
So I will update the Slack message to make sure it has that div in there. that is fixed. Is it helpful if I send that GitHub link, or are you guys all just working off of Slack? Okay, it is in GitHub if you want to reference that and don't want to go through the whole Slack message conversation. I am going to send you guys links to the daily feedback form, because that has been super helpful for not only me, but also who is running Careers in Code. That goes there. That goes. Okay, I'm available for questions. If anyone has any. And as always, you're welcome to drop out of the channel if you want to work on things, and then just hop back in here in the next 15 minutes if you come across any questions. Reminder to fill out the daily feedback form. Links are both in the Zoom chat and in the Slack channel in CIC Student C2. Otherwise, I will be hanging out here.
I have a question, Max.
Sure.
I was just reading the little message thing with Joey, I guess it is. Where he said that you didn't allow for 12 units in your second row. And I remember when we took the call 12 out. Was there logical stuff behind that? Did we do something else after this code was put in to adjust that, or?
No, you don't need it, because I am using my rows pretty rigidly. So because I close my div row out right after I use my col 2, it's not going to cause any issues. So if I had a div col 10 there, and then I forgot to close out the div, and I go in and I add in another col 1 or a col 2, it's going to show up there on the right. And so that's going to cause problems. But because I closed out my row, Bootstrap is kind of going behind me and cleaning up and going, oh, if he puts in another call, it's going to go now on another row, as opposed to getting shoved up where that other column is. So I'm not, that may break some style guides, but it does not break Bootstrap. It does what we want it to.
I was just curious because, I know we did that, and then I read his I just read his message now, so I was trying to understand the, where he was coming from and what we were doing. And
Yeah,
also it kind of
he-
adjusts too, right? Like if you just have call two, won't the column maybe get bigger?
No,
Or
no, the call to will always be two. That's why it's set that way. What Joey was probably referring to is he may have thought we wanted it to be a 12. And so I'm not quite
because
sure.
the other one was, yeah.
No, the other one was a 2, and it was offset by 2, and then it was a 10. And so what that does is if you actually open the Messages app on your phone, you'll notice the messages don't go all the way to the side of the screen. There's a little offset on them. And so that was an intentional design decision to say, hey, don't let the message go all the way to the side of the screen, which makes it feel more like it is a back and a forth. So that's why I did those 10. And with the 2 offset, we just didn't need the 2 offset on the receiving messages because there wasn't anything on the right side of it.
So the offset is almost like a margin or a
It is.
padding or kind of what it does is kind of similar.
Exactly. And we
Okay.
very well could have implemented that with padding. The reason why I kind of cheat and use the call there is because that has a lot of responsiveness built into it, where it's going to shrink down the right amount on a mobile display or desktop display or whatever you're on. So yes, we basically achieved margin, padding, white space, whatever you want to call it. It's that same effect. I just chose to implement it through the Bootstrap grid instead of implementing it, with a media query or by hand.
Yeah, and I like the grid. It's, once you know how to do this stuff, you shouldn't have to grunt through it if you don't want to. I mean, you can use the tools that make it better and easier. So I like it a lot. Well, thank you. I was just curious. I just trying to learn. So thank you.
No problem. And Karen just told me I have the wrong file in the Slack messages, so I'm fixing that right now. Okay, now Slack is up to date. Thank you, Karen, for catching that. Susan, are you talking about the top border or the bottom border?
Yeah, when I reset and send my message, the top of it now touches the line we have. And I don't know if that's what you guys were talking about because I kind of zoned out because I was typing.
We were not talking about that. Let me see. No, my border doesn't move at all. You want to share your screen?
Sure. Sorry, I hit the wrong button and hung up. Okay,
I figured
Redo.
it was either that or your internet just decided to crap out at you at the
One
worst
or the
possible
other.
time.
okay, so I say, hi, Max, and send, and see now it touches.
Yeah. So we did fix this. Basically, if you go back to your HTML, the screen is lagging really hard. There's a div class message row that we have in our HTML that when I copied from the HTML to the CSS, I forgot to put in to the JavaScript. So line 22 right there, we've got that div class row message.
Mhm.
Just copy just that line.
With the brackets or no?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And then go to your script.js where we generate the HTML, we update the HTML, and you'll see it starts with col2. It should really start with that thing that you just copied.
Here?
Yeah, line 43, just paste
Yeah.
in the thing that you have in your clipboard at the backtick, the beginning of the backtick. Yeah.
Oops. Right in between the two?
Yep.
Like
And
that?
now save, and that should fix it. I just didn't highlight enough when I copied it over, and that's what caused that problem. There you go.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
Max, could I ask a little bit more about the timestamp part?
No, absolutely not. Yes, go ahead.
So I get the 12 hours in the military time. But could you explain a little bit more about the backticks with the 0 and then the minutes, about how the minutes are less than 10 and the seconds are less than 10?
Sure. So basically what we're doing is we're saying if minutes is less than 10, we know it's got to be either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So those are all the minutes that we need to add a 0 to the front of. And so basically what we could do is we could say minutes is equal to the string 0 plus whatever the current minutes value is. So what
Okay.
this backtick template literal lets us do is add in the 0, and then whenever we have the $ brackets, it is going to stop evaluating what we literally mean and use a template to drop in whatever the current value of minutes is.
Okay. No. Okay, I get that. I'm surprised it doesn't submit it like that when it pulls it. But no, okay.
Yeah,
I
and
understand.
so
Thank you.
the reasoning behind that is because this is coming out, get minutes is returning an integer, right? And integers don't have leading zeros on it. So whenever you are building an app using zip code, oh, zip code has 5 digits and it's all numbers, so it's just going to be an integer. Well, it turns out zip codes in the Northeast start with 0. So the town I grew up in, the zip code was 08226. Okay, well, now you have the problem of when the user hits the submit button, it goes, oh, your zip code is 8226. And it's like, no, it's not. My zip code is 08226. So whenever you work with a integer, it's always going to strip out those leading numbers. And the same goes with time, right? It's technically 0.1 minutes, but that doesn't look right when we look at time that way. So that's why we have to add in that additional 0. And by doing that, we are actually converting that number into a string. And so that's why it's working.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on that? Cool.
Nope.
So Max, I just did a dummy message. My mom is not with us anymore, but pretending. And I hit send. Is it actually going into something that we can access yet?
It should be saving into your, it should be saving an object into your array.
Ah. All right, let's see. And I actually did that with your file, your index file. And I have your page and mine next to each other to try and see what the hell I'm doing wrong. So, okay, let me check it out.
Hey, Max, this is Latonia. Do you mind looking at my script real quick? My script.
Not at all.
Mode? Thank you. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Actually, I won't see it, will I?
Can you see it okay?
I can. Is there a specific part that's not working?
Well, there's this red dot, this red
Oh,
squiggly. So I'm just like, I feel like I missed something.
you most certainly did. Check out line 54.
54 div.
Yep. And we open a template literal, but we don't close the template literal.
Oh, wait, is this to take this out?
Nope, that's probably right. You just need the closing backtick as the last thing on line 54.
Oh, because this is this long. You're
Yep.
talking about this. Oh, okay. 54.
And then just remove that semicolon that you've got going on there. And then that should work.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
It's like you have hawk cold eyes. Hawk cold eyes. No, that sounds
It
weird.
is always amusing to like, and you'll notice all senior developers have that ability. But people are like, how do you do that? And it's like, I've been reading code for so long, my eyes are trained to see it. Well, it is 8:30, so I will open it up to any final questions before I head out. Okay. One final reminder to fill out the daily feedback form. There should be links in Slack and in Zoom chat and in Google Classroom. So however you get to it, all the same destination. But you guys have an awesome Monday, and I will see you guys tomorrow for part 2.
Thank you, Max.